Hey, welcome to the Sunday preview for this Sunday, the 26th Sunday of the year. And we have this great story from the Gospel of St. Luke about the rich man and Lazarus, one that we all learned when we were kids, right? It's a powerful one. Jesus said to the Pharisees, "There was a rich man who dressed in purple garments and fine linen and dined sumptuously every day. And lying at his door was a poor man named Lazarus, covered with sores. And he would have gladly eaten his fill of the scraps that fell from the rich man's table. Dogs even used to come and lick his sores. When the poor man died, he was carried away by the angels to the bosom of Abraham. The rich man also died and was buried. And from the netherworld, where he was in torment, he raised his eyes and saw Abraham far off and Lazarus at his side. And he cried out, 'Father Abraham, have pity on me. Send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am suffering torment in these flames.' Abraham replied, 'My child, remember you received what was good during your lifetime, while Lazarus received what was bad. And now he's comforted here, whereas you are tormented. Moreover, between us and you, a great chasm is established, to prevent anyone from crossing who might wish to go from our side to yours, or from your side to ours.' He said, 'Then I beg you, Father, send him to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers, that he may warn them, lest they too come to this place of torment.' But Abraham replied, 'They have Moses and the prophets. Let them listen to them.' 'Oh, but no, Father Abraham, if someone from the dead were to go to them, they would repent.' Abraham said, 'If they will not listen to Moses and the prophets, neither will they be persuaded if someone should rise from the dead.'" The Gospel of the Lord. It's a pretty powerful story that St. Luke tells here, or Jesus tells, according to St. Luke. And it's preceded by that first reading from the prophet Amos about the rich who don't care about anything but their own luxury. And maybe a bit of indictment of us all for our love of comfort and security and pleasure. And I think this story about Lazarus and the rich man tells us maybe 3 things that are important. First, to remind us about the fact of sins of omission. We very easily understand the evil that we commit deliberately when we go out and do something that's bad and evil. But it's much harder for us to examine our conscience about the things we didn't do that we should have done. I remember this hit me years ago when I remember reading about some person who was arrested because he just walked by when somebody was drowning in a pond, and he didn't do anything to help the fellow. And later on, the police came and they said this guy could have rescued him. And his defense was, I don't even know the guy. Why should I bother to help him? I could have drowned myself. And he was arrested. Why? Because we have a responsibility to each other, right? We're in a society, we all have to have each other's back. And so sins of omission are sometimes tough for us to discern, especially when we're very individualistic like we are in our culture. We look out for number one. That's one of our slogans, right, that we use all the time. And we have a responsibility to the others, to the poor, to the sick, to the lame. And we have to do what we can to help them. And those are real sins if we don't. They're a real lack of charity, a real lack of compassion, right, that separate us from God, sometimes gravely separate us from God. And that's what this story of the rich man reveals to us. Second thing it reveals, I think, is that the judgment that we will undergo at the end of our lives is definitive. It's forever. And despite the rich man's efforts, he couldn't talk himself out of it. He couldn't do anything about it after he died. There was that great chasm between heaven and hell that prevented anybody from crossing. And that's something that ought to shake us up as well. The decisions that we make in this life determine our eternity. That's a great responsibility that we have. We all like to think we get a pass, that, we return to go and start over again. And no. The decisions we make in this life, for good or for ill, determine our eternity. And then the third thing we should keep in mind is that we need to be listening always. The rich man said, well, send Lazarus back from the dead to warn my brothers, because if somebody rose from the dead, they would pay attention. That's a reference to Jesus' resurrection, right? And Abraham says, no, if they don't listen to Moses and the prophets, they won't be impressed if somebody rises from the dead. And it's so true, really. We know that Jesus rose from the dead, but the people that accepted that resurrection and believe in that resurrection are the people who were already listening to Moses and the prophets. In other words, they have to have a heart that's open to listen to God's revelation, to what God says through the prophets. Right? So the key thing is our heart. How open is it? God's not going to impose himself on us by doing all sorts of miracles to impress us and force us into submission. We need to have a heart that's willing to listen.